The first complaint came on a Tuesday morning, and honestly, I almost laughed when I read it because, according to the report, my small farm store was apparently creating excessive traffic hazards, disturbing neighborhood peace, and operating outside. Approved zoning limits, which made absolutely no sense considering my store had been there for nearly 12 years without a single issue. But that was only the beginning. By the time the 14th complaint showed up, things had become so ridiculous that even county employees were tired of hearing this woman's name. And the craziest part was she had no idea the zoning chairman she kept begging to shut me down bought fresh produce from my store every single week. My name is Luke Harper, and my family owns a farm just outside a growing suburban area where new HOA neighborhoods have started spreading across old farmland over the last few years. Most people around here know our little roadside store because we sell fresh vegetables homemade, jams, local honey eggs, and seasonal pies, and honestly, it became more than just a business over time. People stopped there after church families brought kids during pumpkin season and truck drivers grabbed coffee there before sunrise. It was simple, peaceful, and local. Then the HOA development arrived across the highway, and everything changed. Before this story gets crazier, make sure to like and subscribe to Karen Stories Daily, because stories like this prove that some people will create problems out of absolutely nothing just because they think they can control everybody around them. The first time I met Denise Holloway, she walked into the store wearing expensive golf clothes, giant sunglasses, and an expression like she already hated the place before stepping inside. She looked around slowly, then asked why the parking lot was gravel instead of paved. I told her because it is a farm store, not a shopping mall. She did not smile. Then she complained about the smell of fresh fertilizer coming from the nearby fields and asked if we had plans to modernize the property because, according to her, the area was becoming more upscale now. That sentence alone told me exactly what kind of person she was. I stayed polite, though, because dealing with difficult customers is part of running a local business. But over the next few weeks, she kept returning, and every single visit turned into another complaint. One day, it was the tractor noise. Another day, it was delivery trucks arriving too early then. She complained our seasonal corn display looked messy from the highway. Nobody else cared about any of this. In fact, most customers loved the place exactly because it felt authentic and local. But Denise clearly saw the farm store as some kind of obstacle to her perfect HOA image. Then one afternoon, she came in holding printed papers and introduced herself as part of the HOA Community Advisory Board. That already made me nervous because people who introduce themselves that way are usually preparing to make life difficult. She started talking about preserving property values and maintaining community standards, then casually suggested we should consider changing our business model because roadside farm traffic did not fit the future vision of the area. I remember staring at her for a second, trying to process the audacity. This farm existed long before her HOA was even an idea. I told her respectfully we were fully licensed, fully inspected, and completely legal. She smiled in that fake polite way and said sometimes legal things still become problems for communities. That was the moment I realized she was not making suggestions. She was warning me. About a week later, the first official county complaint arrived. Then another. By the fifth complaint, county staff already sounded exhausted whenever they called me. Every report accused us of something different: unsafe traffic patterns, excessive noise, agricultural odor, improper signage, unauthorized commercial expansion. At one point, she even complained our handmade pie sign distracted drivers. I wish I was joking. County inspectors visited multiple times, but every inspection ended the same way. No violations found. Everything fully compliant. Still, the complaints kept coming. At first, I tried ignoring it because I assumed eventually she would get bored. Instead, she escalated harder. She started photographing customer vehicles, posting online about rural businesses, lowering community standards, and encouraging HOA residents to report us whenever tractors were visible from the road. One older customer named Earl laughed so hard after hearing about it he nearly spilled his coffee across the counter. He said, "Son, that woman moved next to farmland, then got mad crops exist." Honestly, that summed it up perfectly. But despite the humor, the constant inspections started creating stress. Employees became nervous every time county vehicles appeared. Customers started asking questions, and my wife worried people would assume we actually did something wrong. That part frustrated me the most because even false complaints create damage over time. One morning, a zoning officer arrived again looking almost embarrassed before even stepping out of his truck. He walked inside, bought a jar of peach jam, then quietly told me Denise had now filed 14 separate complaints in under 2 months. 14. At that point, even county officials knew this was becoming harassment. I asked him honestly how she keeps getting these inspections approved, and the officer sighed and explained every complaint legally required review, even if they were ridiculous. Then he added something interesting. He said the zoning chairman himself was getting tired of hearing about this case. That caught my attention immediately. Because around here the zoning chairman was known as a serious, no-nonsense guy named Walter Briggs. Walter had lived in the county forever, and everybody respected him because he believed in protecting local farms from suburban overreach. What Denise did not know was Walter stopped at my store almost every Friday morning for fresh tomatoes, coffee, and blueberry pie. Not because we were friends officially, but because he genuinely loved supporting local farms. Still, I never expected that connection to matter much because government officials usually stay neutral publicly. Then came the town zoning meeting, and that night changed everything. Denise arrived carrying a giant folder thick enough to look like a criminal investigation file. She sat with several HOA residents behind her, all dressed like they were attending some luxury real estate conference instead of a county zoning discussion. Meanwhile, I showed up wearing muddy work boots because I had been repairing irrigation lines all afternoon. The difference between us could not have been clearer. When Denise finally spoke, she launched into a dramatic speech about declining neighborhood standards, uncontrolled agricultural activity, traffic concerns, and preserving future development value. You would think my little farm store was running some industrial factory the way she described it. Then she demanded the county reevaluate our commercial zoning status completely. The room got quiet after she finished because honestly, she sounded confident. Very confident. Then Walter Briggs leaned back slowly in his chair, looked directly at Denise, and asked one simple question. Mrs. Holloway, how many times have county inspections found violations at this farm store? Her confidence slipped immediately. She admitted, none so far. Walter nodded calmly, then asked another question. How long has this farm operated legally before your HOA development existed? Again, she hesitated. Someone quietly answered from the audience, over a decade. Walter looked around the room for a moment, then smiled slightly. And that is when I realized Denise had made a massive mistake by turning this into a public fight, because now everybody was about to hear exactly what county leadership really thought about people attacking local farms for existing. Walter leaned forward in his chair and looked directly at Denise while the whole room stayed silent. Then he said something nobody there expected. He said this farm was part of the community long before the HOA existed, and every single inspection confirmed the business followed county rules completely. You could feel the mood in the room change instantly. Denise tried interrupting again, talking about property values and community image, but Walter stopped her and reminded everyone that moving near farmland means accepting normal farm activity. Then he calmly mentioned something that made several people laugh quietly. He said he personally shopped at my store every week and never once experienced any issue Denise described. Her face turned bright red immediately. At that point, even some HOA residents looked embarrassed sitting beside her. Walter officially closed the complaint review and stated there was no basis for further zoning action against the farm store. But he was not finished. He also warned that repeated false complaints wasting county resources could lead to penalties and investigation for harassment. The room went completely quiet after that. Denise gathered her papers fast and walked out without saying another word. After that day, the complaints stopped completely. Customers actually started supporting us even more once they heard what happened, and our little farm store became busier than ever. Sometimes people think power comes from making noise and filing complaints, but real respect comes from honesty, consistency, and treating people right. And Denise learned that lesson in front of the entire county meeting. If you enjoyed this story from Karen Stories Daily, then subscribe, and comment below if you think HOA boards go too far sometimes, because honestly, this whole situation still feels unreal to me.